Hello, my beanie babies. Welcome back to another video. Long time no see. I know it's been forever, but I'm not going to go into details about, oh, I apologize. I know it's been forever. But anyway, I have my girl Jennifer back with me. So you guys, for those of you that was not able to watch my first video that we've done together, we're coming back with a part two because I believe that it's very important that we identify some of the things that we've gone through, some of the things that we've dealt with, some of the things that we go through that does not identify as far as who we are and whose we are. So I wanted to bring Jennifer back just to hear firsthand the experience that a lot of women and men go through and dealing with narcissists. So Jennifer is going to go just a little deeper today for us, just so if anyone is out there that's dealing with any of these symptoms, they can identify a little bit as far as what it is. Some of us decide to stay in a relationship or friendship or church or whatever the case may be, because it comes in different, it has different eyes, different faces. So you can't say, well, this doesn't apply to me because I'm not going through this, I'm not going through that. But just listen, and this is more of a testimony versus just talking about it. So I'm just going to turn it over to Jennifer and let her flow the way she wants.
No pressure, Sabrina.
I know, right?
Hi, everybody. Happy to be back with Sabrina, of course. And I know we talked about a lot of different things last time as far as narcissism and how often you can be in that relationship with somebody who is narcissistic and not even realize it. And just to kind of reiterate, I think a lot of people throw around the word narcissistic, or they talk about people being narcissistic. There's a difference between somebody being selfish and kind of self-absorbed and being narcissistic. So somebody who's selfish, they're just thinking about themselves. They kind of just do what they want to do. So maybe you're married to somebody who just doesn't really think about the fact that going golfing every single Sunday for 6 or 8 hours and not spending time with the family is a selfish thing to do. Not that they shouldn't enjoy things on their own, but if there's not a balance with the family, that's kind of selfish. But if they're present during, the week and they're, a caring partner and generally you have a good partnership, that's not narcissistic behavior. Narcissistic behavior is when it's pervasive and it's in every aspect of your relationship. It's when you feel that you're not heard, you feel like you're going crazy, you feel like you're not seeing reality for what it is, because that's what the narcissist does. They condition you to believe that your perception of reality is wrong, and it's not just that they do everything as it pertains to themselves. It's really about power and control, and how they can maintain that in your relationship and within their family. The other thing with narcissistic behavior is that people outside of the relationship often view that person as being a remarkable human being. Excellent employee, amazing friend, looks like the model husband from the outside in. And I think I mentioned on the last video, many people would see that sort of social media persona or what was presented to the public, because there were many things that were done that looked like I should be, absolutely grateful and wonderful, but didn't realize that, the material things don't make up for, the lack of being heard in a relationship, the lack of respect, the lack of partnership and understanding. I think we touched a little bit last time on how communication plays a big part in that. And what surprised me, because after separating, I went through counseling, which, I think I recommend to everybody, whether you just choose to stay in the relationship or you choose to get out of the relationship. I made the choice to get out of the relationship, and for me, it was the best thing I could have done. Almost immediately, the day I moved into my new place, felt such a sense of relief.
Awesome.
And it was even as the little things as you go through setting up your new life that you realize how much you had given up of yourself and of your own power. It was things like where I was putting things in the kitchen. I didn't get ridiculed because, oh, the glasses don't go there, or why are you putting the pots and pans there? Which is amazing because you don't cook.
It's the little things.
It is. Yeah. And it's, he didn't spend any amount of time in the kitchen besides microwaving things occasionally. So how does it matter where I put them? I'm cooking. But you don't realize, and you find yourself explaining or changing what you're naturally doing because they make you feel absolutely stupid for doing what you're doing. So just setting things up, the bedspread I chose, because in the past I would buy sheets or I would buy, blankets, and I would get in trouble because they'd be too feminine or too girly. And I would go out of my way to make sure they weren't, but unless it was like plain plaid or brown and gray, if it had any bit of color or design, it was considered too feminine. And so our whole house ended up being decorated more on the masculine side, which doesn't take into account the fact that I'm female and I like feminine things. So yeah, maybe we're not gonna paint the house pink, but I deserve to have some representation of myself there. Right. Those are things you don't think about. It happens so slowly and over time that you don't recognize it.
Let me ask you, so in your opinion, how does depression
play into it?
Yeah.
The biggest thing I think is that you often, when you're in that relationship, you go into a depression and don't even realize it. You have that sense of something's not right, but you can't figure out why and what. And for me, the depression really came in from, there were times when I would literally be laying in the bed, crying myself to sleep because I was so frustrated and so unable to vocalize, because when you try to have these conversations with that narcissistic partner, you're shut down. And there's all kinds of different ways that they shut you down. They either immediately tell you you're crazy, you're imagining things, it's all in your head. You're told that you're not seeing things the right way, or you get the silent treatment. There's they just shut you down. They don't talk to you. I would go days sometimes and he wouldn't speak to me. He'd come and go from the house without having any conversation. I would speak to him and he wouldn't respond, or very, very minimal response. What I felt like was I had completely lost my own identity in the effort of trying to conform to what I thought I was supposed to be in order to keep the peace. And that's really what it comes down to. It's about keeping the peace. It's avoiding the arguments because it's exhausting. Yeah. It's exhausting to constantly be feeling like you're on guard. And I think those are some of the signs that now, looking back, and again, having gone through counseling and done a lot of reflection, having better tools now to determine. So going forward in any new relationship, looking for those signs is a little bit easier when you're more aware of it.
Yeah. And I think, like, I just feel a lot of people think going through counseling is a bad thing, but it's really not.
It's not. It's nothing to be ashamed of.
No.
And I mean, I highly recommend it for many people. I mean, none of us have perfect relationships, and none of us are perfect. And in going through the process, I was able to, learn things about myself that, that I could do differently. I got really bad at communicating because I just stopped. You get to a point where you just don't say anything anymore because it's useless. And so that sort of seeped over into other areas of my life, or I had gotten to the point where I wouldn't speak up for what I wanted or voice my opinion, and that's not me. That was never me growing up.
But it's pretty much was taken away from you.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's exhausting to keep up with.
Yeah,
I think when you establish boundaries, it's very helpful. Obviously, we're not talking about a situation where there's violence and physical abuse. If you're in that situation, you need help to deal with that. You need help from the outside of the relationship. And it's not for me to say whether you should stay or not stay. But you should be safe, and you should make sure you're able to get to a safe situation. But if we're talking about the non-physical type, and that abuse is just as damaging, sometimes more so. Because people don't see it. Physical abuse, there's usually other people around you who recognize that it's happening, even if they don't speak up about it. but the narcissistic abuse is something that people don't understand why you're unhappy. Well, it looks like you have the perfect relationship.
Yeah.
He has a great job, and he buys you all these things, and you guys travel, and yet they don't see those times behind closed doors when you get berated for embarrassing them because you may have said something they didn't agree with in front of other people, or because you wore something they didn't approve of, and you know, you're not treated as an adult in the relationship or a partner. So one of the things that surprised me, and again, I think I touched on that briefly last time, going through the counseling process, was when the counselor mentioned verbal abuse, and I said, "Oh, you know, no, that didn't happen. He didn't yell at me. He didn't raise his voice to me. I mean, it wasn't like he screamed at me all the time, and he generally didn't call me names. I mean, we had some arguments occasionally, but when we started talking about it, I realized that I wasn't defining verbal abuse the right way. And I think I recommended it last time, and I recommend it again this time. It's called The Verbally Abusive Relationship, and it's by Patricia Evans. I definitely recommend, if you feel like you're in that situation, get that book, read it, get it on audiobook and listen to it if that's what you prefer, because it's eye-opening. So those periods when we would have a misunderstanding or an argument, and I would get the silent treatment, that's part of verbal abuse. And that's a sign of verbal abuse. Where if you are sitting at dinner, or you're making dinner, or you're in the room together watching the news, and you make, you know, idle conversation, comment on a news story, or mention something and you get zero response, or they just walk away without responding, that's part of a verbally abusive pattern of behavior. And I strongly recommend learning the tools on how to combat that. The other one that was surprising to me was when they try to discount what you say. I used to just think he was a really negative person. And it turns out it's more about that control and that power. And it was things like, you know, when we'd be out to dinner and everybody would be commenting on how great their food was, and oh, it's a nice restaurant. Every single time. I can't remember a time we would go somewhere and he would actually say, wow, this meal's delicious. You would ask him how his food was, and he'd be, oh, it's okay. This is a little cold. This is a little bland. This is a little this. Never was it, oh yeah, this was really good. Ever. And it was not just, you know, going out to eat. It was various other things. It was like things were just never quite right or never good enough.
So do you believe that along the way, I mean, it's not just a behavior that just happens overnight. I truly believe it's a process. It could be he or whatever could have been treated that way. So he started to learn those type of behaviors and, you know, get to the point where, you know, I'm in this relationship. I've been verbally abused, but I would not allow anyone else to do it to me. But I'm doing it to the next person. I don't realize I'm doing it to the next person, but it's there. But if I try to confront you with it, don't tear me down. Listen to what I'm saying. You don't have to agree with what I'm saying, but respect my opinion just like I need to respect yours.
Exactly. And if that's missing, that's a problem. The thing with people who are truly narcissistic is, if you do your research on it, the general consensus among the psychological community is that they have actually gotten very stunted, that they've never developed beyond a young child, and that their reactions and behaviors and mannerisms and ways of learning to control generally occur because whatever happened in their early childhood stopped their maturity there. So yes, they're able to function externally, but their emotional ability is very stunted. And they're unable to empathize with people. And they truly do not have the ability to see things from other people's points of view. They don't understand and don't have the ability to understand. So arguing with them is useless.
It's useless. But can you imagine so many women and men that's out there that's going through it now? Especially when people lost their job. You know, they're pretty much stuck in the house because of they just can't get out right now.
And that's honestly, that was the
It's
period that for me was the real eye opener. We went through a period where we were, he had traveled a lot for his job. And then suddenly he was home every day, all day. And that was suddenly where it became even more painfully obvious
yes.
how big the problem really was and how much it was affecting not just me, but the children.
Yeah.
And then my mom came and stayed with us for a couple of months after my dad passed away, and she was noticing it. And it was things like him being in the house all day long, me being at work for 10, 11 hours, and dishes not being done, house not being clean, no food cooked, not even a plan for anything for dinner. And you know, and my son would ask what was for dinner, and he'd say, well, wait till your mom gets home. And when I would comment on, you know, how come this isn't done? Well, because we never know what you're going to want. He would blame it on me and say it was because I was the one that was uncooperative. I was the one that was turning it back around.
Yeah,
exactly. Making it your fault. Which was ridiculous because it might not be what I want to eat, but if I only have to worry about myself.
Right.
And part of it is because I'm, you know, if I'm training and prepping for a show, my diet's very particular, which means I'm not eating what I'm making for them anyway. So it would have been great if he'd just taken care of himself and our son. And all I had to worry about was what I was going to eat, because very often my food was prepped ahead of time anyway. Right. So it was an empty excuse, but I let it slide, and I would just, you know, it's like it becomes such a habit of how you live that until somebody's pointing it out, you don't realize
that's what I was
happening.
about to ask you. Like you know something is not right, but sometimes it takes someone else from the outside.
Right. You feel like it's that sense of like dissatisfaction with your life, or feeling like you're not doing things that are in character for you, or you're accepting things that are not, you know, that are out of character, or willing to do or not do certain things. And it bothers you and you're aware of it, but you don't really know how to identify it or what the problem is or how to stop it or how to change it. And, you know, I think for many women that end up leaving the relationships, they just get to a certain point. There's usually some event or some instance where it's like, okay, I just can't anymore. You just, it almost becomes like a life or death situation, because it's like, for me, if I didn't make a change, I felt like I was going to just drown and completely lose all sense of reality at that point, because you just feel like you're losing a grip on reality. You know, it's like all these things that I can't do, can't say, can't, you know, think, can't want without being criticized. And it's not criticism in a mild way. I mean, it's things like I'd be dressed and about to walk out the door for work, and he would stop me in my tracks and question the skirt I had on and why I was wearing that to work, and it was far too revealing. And I promise you, that's not how I dress. I've been in a professional capacity for quite some time. So, but I would go and change, because it was easier to do that than to deal with the fallout of not doing what was said.
And it's not right. That is wrong on all levels. On all levels.
Yes. We'd be walking through somewhere. I remember distinctly an incident when we were walking through the mall. We were on vacation at Disney, and we went to the mall in Orlando, and we're walking through, and some guy looked at me and he made some comment, and my husband turned to me and berated me for what I was wearing, that if my shorts hadn't been whatever length they were, then other people wouldn't be looking at me and pissing him off.
That's terrible. In my opinion, that's the insecurity on the other side.
Of him. Very insecure.
I mean, because if you know, once again, if you know who you are and whose you are, you can continue to stand tall. And in my opinion, that's a compliment of the husband or of the wife, whoever may be going through the situation.
Exactly.
I mean, you have to, at the end of the day, you have to trust. And I think trust has a lot to do with it too. Because if you're insecure and you also have trust issues, it's not going to balance out. It definitely is not going to work. Somebody has to be the bigger person. Exactly. And can you imagine when you finally decided to say, you know what? Enough is enough. I can't do it anymore. It's not worth my mind,
sense of self.
And it's my mental health is more important
Absolutely.
than the foolishness on this side. So tell us, like you said, the first day When did you finally decide? You know what? That's it.
I decided that I needed to leave about a year before I actually said anything. I just started to put things in place, started to kind of make a plan, figure out what I would need budget-wise. That had always been an issue, was, being afraid I couldn't afford to support my son and I.
Yes.
For years, when our son was younger, if I would, suggest that I was unhappy or maybe didn't want to continue, he would threaten me with our son.
See?
So it was always, at that point, he made more money than me. He had more contacts, that kind of thing. So I took that seriously and really thought that I would potentially lose custody of our son. Well, now that he's older, that was less of an issue. And over the years realized he didn't really want the responsibility of full-time parenting, because that took away from his time to do whatever it is he wants to do. But I made the decision probably about a year ahead of time. Once I actually told him that I wanted to separate, of course, he pulled out all the stops, became very charming, started to try to address some of the behaviors.
But by then it was too late. Your mom was already made up.
It was too late at that point. It was like, I've been talking about this for so many years. And so initially, he asked me to give him, a couple of weeks. And we kind of went back and forth, because I agreed to give him a couple of weeks. And then the date, would roll around. He'd made no attempt to look for an apartment. He made no attempt to look for another place, because he said he would move so that we didn't have to uproot our son. So I think that happened twice. And then he comes and he's talking about buying a piece of land and building a house, and the process might take a year. And I'm thinking to myself, okay. And so I didn't even say anything at that point. I went hunting for a place to live. I rented a house and then announced to him that I had done so. So I basically said, I've rented a house. I can move in on this date. And I didn't tell him too far in advance, because again, I was never sure what the response and reaction would be. So I waited till about 2 weeks before. And then, of course, we had the discussion about, we need to tell our son, that we're separating. And we went the whole entire 2 weeks, and I kept saying, we need to talk to Micah. We need to talk to Micah. He didn't want to deal with it. And he waited till the night before, and then had this bizarre conversation with our son about how some families have non-traditional lifestyles and don't necessarily live the way other families live, but that, we'll always be there to take care of him, and left him very confused. And left him with the impression that he would be moving in with us shortly. And that continued. So I ended up moving August the 3rd, 2 years ago, coming up on 2 years, and I ended up moving in, and it was just such an amazing feeling. This was my place, that nobody was going to be able to tell me anything. I could decorate it how I want, I could set it up how I want. I didn't care if I didn't have any furniture. I would have been just as happy.
Wow.
And for the first couple of months, he continued to try and give this impression to our son that it was temporary, and he would be moving in. And over time, I just kept telling our son the opposite. No, this is a permanent arrangement. It's just going to take some time for Dad to come around and get used to it. He eventually found, another place, and then eventually bought a house that's 3 hours away. Now we're 2 years into it, and I've done everything I can to try and keep it amicable, and as has he, for our son's sake. So we're able to have conversations, but one of the things that became apparent very early on, and that's when I decided to go to counseling, was probably almost a year into it, maybe 6 months into it. And part of the reason that I went to counseling was because it was like I couldn't shake him. Christmas rolled around and he was there. Birthdays rolled around and he was there. He got very indignant last year because I made a weekend trip plan for my birthday with the kids.
Without him.
And it didn't include him, and I didn't tell him, other than to, a little, I think a week or so beforehand, that I would be taking our son, for this weekend trip. And he was very offended that he wasn't invited or included. And that's when I was really aware that I needed to get some counseling to figure out how to really break those ties. And it helped a lot. She gave me the tools on, how to have conversations, how to shut down the manipulation, you know, the pity party, the making me feel bad or guilty. And it worked, because then the next year rolled around, Thanksgiving, Christmas, he was not included. And it was so much more peaceful. It was very stressful that first 6 months or a year, even for my older kids, because it was awkward, and he would just be there, and he would just be sitting there, and he wouldn't be engaging. It wasn't like you were having a great interaction. So I just encourage everybody to find a way to find peace with the situation. And if you choose to leave, do it on your terms, and don't allow that manipulation to control every aspect of it. I think getting counseling, reading books, learning how you contributed to the situation with your responses, or, you know, not being able to break it. And then the other thing is, as you embark on new relationships, really recognize the behaviors. If you feel at all uncomfortable or awkward when you're with this person, if he seems angry at the world, or has a lot of, you know, black and white ideas about people, or makes jokes at your expense early on, those are classic signs that you need to not be in that relationship. This should be your best friend. This should be somebody you can be completely yourself with, that is your biggest encourager and supporter. And if he's not, don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
It's better to be on your own and be mentally healthy than to be in a relationship and be compromising everything about yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Jennifer, I just want to, we're going to end the video in a few minutes, but I just want to thank you so much, because Jennifer is speaking from the heart. She's speaking from, and it is her testimony. And I pray that this video helps whoever's out there that's going through whatever you may be going through. Talk to someone. It doesn't hurt to get counseling, to seek other people that have gone through it, or that's going through it now. So you guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank you again, Jennifer, and we'll talk to you later. Please do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye.